Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla. Today's guest is Sarah Purvey, clinical psychologist, author of Keep Sane and Parent On, and clinic director of Eastern Shore Psychology in Hobart. She's a mum of two girls, and she provides one-on-one therapy for parents to improve their mental health in many areas. Think things like anxiety, depression, trauma, and overall mum challenges. Sarah also supports adults experiencing PTSD and a range of other mental health issues. She has an online support group for mums called Your Sanctuary, which runs a couple of times a year. Sarah has such a lovely, balanced presence that always makes me feel like I'm letting out a breath I've been holding on to. Today's chat was absolutely no different. We deep dive into the idea of mum rage, and it's just so validating and helpful to hear Sarah's take on such a common issue that we're facing. I personally found it really interesting and useful, and I hope that you do too. All right, let's do it. So Sarah does a guest presentation around perfectionism in parenthood for my baby and toddler Mealtimes members, and the questions and feedback that come up when we share that are just so validating. I wanted her to speak about some of the things that do come up, particularly in early parenthood, or maybe I'm just saying that because I'm in early parenthood, but namely around mum rage and guilt. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So lovely to have you. Let's start with the hard-hitting kind of ones. Why are we all so mad? Why are we so angry?
So many reasons. It's really hard to narrow it down. Actually, this is a topic that I could talk about for days, really. But there's so many different factors. And, as you mentioned, you're in the early parenting stage, but there's so much that happens in the early parenting stages, even though the actual things that trigger us are different. The actual outcome is still the same in terms of anger and things like mum guilt. So there's certainly things that can continue to happen no matter what. But anger and mum rage, certainly in those early days, can be connected to sleep deprivation and basic physiological needs. So that's kind of a really big factor that can kind of really contribute. Things like also being hungry is also kind of a basic physiological need. Like hunger is a definite thing, and it's certainly something that can go by the wayside because we get so busy doing everything for our babies, toddlers, and older kids as well. So we can kind of forget how important that is.
Absolutely. I remember this example where I was like convinced that I had to rock my baby to sleep at this particular time in case, like something bad would happen if she, was awake for 10 minutes longer. And I remember being so hungry that I was like physically kind of shaky. And I think now, of course I was angry. I was exhausted and hungry. It's wild.
That's right. It's a terrible combination. And I think, at the baseline, that is the need that needs to be met. If you're angry, you need to ask yourself, like, how much sleep have I had and have I eaten? And then kind of come back to it. But
what else?
It's not that easy, I know, to kind of just achieve those things, but they're definitely kind of really baseline things that need to be managed before you think of like all these other kind of strategies that you might need to do to manage anger. That's important too. But sometimes it's kind of just really basic stuff that can make us flip into rage or irritability. But there's so many other things like a general sensory overload as well. Like the noise can be a big trigger for people, or the evening kind of rush of needing to make dinner and then having competing noises of maybe siblings fighting or baby crying or, and just even the sounds in the kitchen or a sound of a TV. All these different things can kind of become very triggering into a sort of a sensory overload space. And then, yelling and anger and rage can kind of happen from that. Even rushing, needing to drop the kids off to childcare or school, that early morning rush and needing to get to work on time, all those sorts of things can also lead into sort of an extra sense of stress and pressure. And anger is about the brain releasing pressure, basically. It's like a volcano that the pressure builds and it builds and it builds and it builds. And you've only got so much capacity before that pressure will just erupt. So it's the brain trying to find a way to release pressure and not having the opportunities to release pressure in any other way, because there can be just the lack of opportunity to do anything else, really. You can't really get away from your baby in the middle of the night if they're screaming, or, with the relentless sleep deprivation, or if there's a lack of support as well from partner or lack of support from family, just the ongoing nature of needing to tend to the baby and the children's needs over and over again can kind of really build up that stress and pressure.
And it's generally not acceptable to walk out of the house during the dinner time witching hour rush if everyone's crying, is it? You kind of have to stay there and cope with it.
Well, this is the thing, yes. And I mean, it isn't a bad strategy to just walk outside if you really feel like you're going to lose it. If someone's kind of really in a danger kind of red zone where they're kind of pretty irrational and illogical and yelling, it is definitely better to kind of walk outside, even just for a moment, and kind of just plant your feet on the ground and feel some fresh air on your face, and then come back into the witching hour. Yeah, there's it's not a bad sort of thing to do, but yeah, that's right. You can only do that so many times as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I'm sure you've got more to add, but that feeling of pressure, like when you were listing those things, the drop off, the witching hour, dealing with the whining or the crying, I feel that's quite a physical pressure as well, right? You can almost feel it closing in around you at times. And that idea that anger is releasing that pressure, it really just makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's right. Like anger is certainly a build-up of pressure and the body needing to release it. And the fight or flight response is communicating a need, like it's a need to escape from the environment. And anger is one where, it's part of the fight flight. So literally we're fighting to get out of a situation, in a situation where you kind of can't really do anything, if that makes sense. There is a helplessness or a powerlessness because you can't leave the house.
Yeah.
Can't walk away for 3 hours or something like that. You know that you've got to just keep going back into it. So it is the brain trying to communicate a need and release pressure, albeit in not a super helpful way. But I guess it's being able to learn ways to manage that release, so it's not quite so releasing, or we're releasing pressure before it gets to that point. So noticing cues, noticing what triggers us, doing a great kind of level of preparation and breathing perhaps before we're kind of getting into these meltdown zones. Making sure we've eaten again, trying to get sleep wherever that's possible. I know that's not always achievable, but it is looking out for triggers and looking out for the things that might kind of set us off, among many other things that we'll kind of go into. And I also kind of just think the overall busyness of life that we're in, like there's a real kind of fast pace nature to everything that we're doing, and there's just not enough time. And again, there's often just a real lack of support and that lack of a village that so many women seem to have, where we have these expectations that we kind of do feel like we need to be doing it all, like we need to be going to work, and we need to be doing well at work, and we need to be doing well in every area of parenting, and we need to keep the house clean, and we need to cook nutritious food all the time, and we need to be connected and playing with our children and relaxed and calm with our children all the time. These unrealistic expectations and social media that kind of puts these unrealistic expectations on us. There's just so many reasons and so much pressure.
I feel like we could take the whole podcast to talk about like all the reasons that mums are angry, because there's so much going on for them.
That's right. Yeah, there absolutely is. And that's what I mean. It's like it's such an enormous topic to unpack. Yeah. Not to mention hormones and
Yes.
penile and breastfeeding hormones and neurodiversity, health issues, thyroid issues. There's so much stuff.
There's so much stuff.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. It's something there I really identify with. I think with my first baby, I felt a pressure, whether it was from myself or society in general, to like continue on my life as normal, even though I
Mm,
had a baby, right? Like the baby can just come along to things and the baby will just sleep under the table kind of
mm,
pressure. And I think that was a huge part of why I was so, well, I experienced quite a lot of like mum rage in those first couple of years. But I also think back to what I was doing in a day, and I was trying to schedule everything so that I could go and do something, or, that, but we were down to the wire with the minutes. Like, you need to sleep from this time to this time so that I can go and do this thing at this time to this time. And, like
mm.
I feel like I learned a lot of life lessons from that experience, but it probably does explain some of that. Yeah,
Makes a
the
lot of sense.
rage that, yeah. Because I
Yeah.
think, would you say like the people that you work with are surprised by that feeling? Like that was something I was not expecting, was
Oh,
to
yeah.
feel really angry.
100%. It's really surprising, isn't it? Because most women have never been that angry before, myself included. Can totally relate to that feeling of just thinking, who am I? Like, where
Yeah.
did where did I come from?
What do you remember
So,
personally of that?
oh yeah, I can just really remember some times where I've just, just really yelled, so loud basically, or said things that are just completely irrational and unhelpful. Like, and you know that they are when they're coming out of your mouth, but that just feels uncontrollable. Um, yeah, so yeah, definitely many occasions, to be honest. Like that's certainly something that I have personally struggled with a lot. It's probably my biggest issue in parenting is
Yeah.
managing patience and irritability. So that was a really surprising feature of my personality. And I know it's really surprising for so many women I see. They can just completely relate to that story. And
It's
there's some
interesting.
funny Instagram memes, like where you see some of those things. Like I used to think I was patient until I had kids. Yeah.
I it's interesting to hear you say that though, because I think of you as such a calm, balanced person. And obviously you are, but I do think this parenting part brings out a heap of things that we probably weren't ready for. Like it's probably one of the big times in our lives as mothers, particularly, that we feel out of control. Like there are lots of things that we cannot manipulate or
Yeah,
manage or do. And so that, I guess,
absolutely.
brings up a lot of things that we're not expecting. And I definitely was surprised. And I know I've shared an example where it was when my youngest was still a baby, and I would hear her cry at night, and I would get this kind of stab of fear to my heart, like, oh God, she's awake. And then I would get this
Mm,
flood of like red hot anger, like, how
mm,
dare she wake in the night, even though, like, physiologically, it was totally normal. I, on a logical level, knew that's what's going to happen. But this
mm,
emotional response was something I was quite surprised by. And I feel like I was aware of it. But when I shared that, the number of people who messaged me to say, like, wow, I didn't realize this was what other people were going through.
mm,
I thought there was just something defective with me that came out
mm.
when I was a mum. And it's like, absolutely not. Like, what would you say in that example?
Yeah, just absolutely can agree again on a personal level, and for so many other mums that I work with, and there's so much shame attached to it, isn't there? For that very
Mm,
reason that people are not talking about it, and it feels like such an uncontrollable and irrational reaction. Where logically, yes, you can know, of course, babies wake in the middle of the night, but it comes down to that. Really kind of basic physiological stuff. Like it's the emotional part of the brain that's working and not the logical part. And the way that kind of brains work on an emotional level is that when emotion and a physiological kind of response is triggered, like they're not the logical areas of the brain. And when you're really tired again, and baby's waking again, and it's again and again, like night after night after night, it is that emotional part of the brain that is just screaming out saying, I can't handle this, I don't want to do this again. And that's what that adrenaline surge is. Like, it's a primal, really unconscious feeling that comes up, where logically, of course, we wouldn't choose to do that. But it's almost like a bit of a panic response. When people have high anxiety or are prone to panic. Panic feels pretty uncontrollable at the time. It can feel like it comes out of the blue, where the brain is just perceiving a threat. And people wouldn't choose to have a panic attack, but there's a subconscious kind of priming for their brain to perceive threat. And that's kind of how it is with anger as well. It is basically the same physiological response. It's just a different manifestation. It just feels different. So logically, we know, yep, baby's waking, but for that primal part of your brain, it's saying, I don't want to do this again. I'm so tired, I want to sleep.
Yeah. And two things come up for me there. One is around that, like the primal versus the logical part of your brain, right? You have that physical response. And then
Mm.
the logical part of your brain is saying, well, of course, like the baby's going to wake up. That's what happens. And
Mm.
do you think that that then feeds into these feelings of guilt that we're having as well? Because then we're beating ourselves up about, something that is quite out of our control, this physical response. Do you think that
Yeah,
feeds into some of those feelings, or the shame, I think, that you've
for sure.
mentioned?
Absolutely, for sure. It does. It's that feedback loop, isn't it? Like, where you get angry and then your logical brain tries to switch on and say, well, why are you doing that for? That's completely irrational, and that's not okay. And then the self-criticism kicks in, and all that guilt and shame. And then that absolutely makes it worse. And it becomes this sort of unhelpful paradox that the more that we engage with that logical kind of guilt and self-criticism, you're actually even more likely to start losing your temper and exploding if you can't kind of get a little bit of a level of trying to develop more compassion for self and more understanding for self, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that's
Which is
kind of
so
one of the,
tricky when it's at
yeah,
a time in your life when you're first kind of looking after somebody else, right? That you're having to deal with a lot of the things that come up for you whilst also physically caring for another
yeah,
human.
yeah, that's right. It's the worst possible timing for it to come up, isn't it?
Oh,
It's
it's a
just that,
wild ride, this
yeah,
motherhood thing.
sure it is. And just on lack of control, I wanted to sort of say that there are so few other times that women that have that lack of control, because
Yeah.
pre-kids, you just have so much capacity to have control over your life.
Mm.
You can go to the gym, or you can eat the food that you want to eat. You can have probably really plenty of time to yourself comparatively. You can sit down and watch a movie, or go for a walk, or spend time with your partner. There's so many ways to kind of be able to control your environment. And a lot of kind of women with anxiety and anger, they tend to be the kinds of people that function really highly in their life pre-children. They've probably, done very, spent a lot of time wanting to do well in school or uni, or in their jobs, or just in their relationships and things like that. And they probably have fairly high expectations on themselves and do a lot to manage their life in the way that they want to. And then again, you throw babies and children into the mix, and you just completely lose that control and capacity. You just can't be on top of every single thing that you want to be doing.
Yeah. How common do you think these kind of feelings of rage are for mums? Like what percentage of people, do we have any idea about that? Is there any research into it?
I tried to do a little bit of a Google to get some statistics on it, and I didn't get very far, to be honest. I think it's really tricky to determine how many people would feel rage. I guess, from a people actually admitting it is
Yes.
the difficult thing, and also what that actually looks like as well. Because like, because I think there's a continuum of how difficult it looks, because sometimes I find that people can think that they're really angry, but comparatively they're not as angry as someone else, if that makes sense. They might
Yes.
just be a little bit irritable and snappy. But then on the other hand, you can really have like extreme rage where there is kind of a lot of, just really yelling or smacking or just a complete kind of loss of control on a really regular basis. So yeah, to be honest, I guess in terms of statistics, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I would say for the
Yeah. What
mums that
about in
I
your
see,
clinic? Yeah.
yeah, in the clinic, oh, look, I'd probably say 70 or 80%
Yeah.
of women are struggling with it. That would be the biggest thing that they usually struggle with. The biggest reason why they come in to therapy in the finish is usually that, and being and anxiety and being someone that worries a lot
Yes.
in the parenting space are the biggest reasons that they come in. But I'd say, yeah, most women that I'm seeing, it'd have to be 80%, I'd say.
And would
And
you say for those people they weren't typically angry people prior to parenthood?
yes,
Yeah.
yep, I would say that. Yeah,
That really brings out that.
typically high functioning perfectionist people, I would say,
We
but
don't know
not
anyone
angry.
like that,
No,
Sarah, do we?
no, I don't know anyone like that.
I don't identify it whatsoever.
No, me either. Totally okay at accepting mistakes and that I'm good enough at everything I do.
I do find a little bit of comfort, and like, don't get me wrong, I think the system around mums does not help them in those rage kind of experiences. But I do take a little bit of solace in thinking that like this is actually so common. Do you know, so
Mm.
many people are experiencing this. And
Mm.
I do think there is quite a lot that we can do, right, to help ourselves in these moments. What would be kind of some of the common things that you're working with people coming to see you about this topic?
So, yeah, I think if we just work with the idea that, Western society is not setting women up well to be able to manage their mental health anyway, with things like there is this sort of subconscious kind of expectation that women do it all, and they've got so much opportunity really to be able to go to work and look after the children, that equality, like in inverted commas, like has put us in this position where we can now go to work and we can do all the things. But that's really actually putting extra pressure on us in many ways, because a lot of the time I hear in the therapy space, definitely not all men at all, some men are super helpful, super practical, but there's still a large percentage of women who have partners who are not super useful, because they've seen in their own parenting in childhood where their mother has just done it all and their father has been the practical provider. And so there is just this legacy that's happened with the generations before us, which is a cycle that still needs to be broken. So that cycle breaking is what we're sort of trying to do now, or what we need to be doing, of breaking that cycle of women carrying the mental load and doing everything. So I think there's that as an underpinning that is a really difficult thing to change and needs to change for women's moods to be better, for them to be less angry and for them to feel less out of control.
Such a great point to raise that first, though. Thank you, because I feel like we naturally go into this idea of like, what can I do to fix this fault with myself? And actually, like, it's so much bigger than that. Like, it is not a personality flaw of yours. You're just under so much pressure that,
That's right.
yeah, it's so tricky.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's why it is so tricky and so layered. But yes, there are certainly things you can still do individually. And that's a massive rabbit hole to walk down, that one as well, because it's not an easy set of strategies. I guess I would say it's really important to look at someone's overall health as well, and that making sure that basic needs have been met in terms of sleep and food, regular food that's sort of happening, and also whether people are getting PMS or not, whether it's any kind of hormonal imbalances, whether they have endometriosis or PCOS or things like that that can interrupt mood and cause more anxiety or depression or anger. And getting people to track their cycles and seeing if there is any particular pattern between their increased anger and yelling and rage at particular times of their cycle. That's a huge one. Like it's a huge one, because sometimes I'll kind of find people where they just don't really notice. They're not kind of developing that awareness yet, but then when they actually go and track things, they sort of start to notice that there is a pattern to it. And that's super important, developing patterns, and then an awareness of what your triggers are. So trying to track when you're more likely to lose your temper. Like, is it with a childcare kind of morning drop off and going to work when you're busy rushing and you need your child to get ready? Or is it at nighttime with the witching hour? Is it at bedtime? And in the best possible way, kind of going into those situations knowing that you are likely to lose your temper, kind of just expecting that this is the road that you're going to go down, and not kind of just thinking, okay, I'm definitely not going to lose my temper and it'll all be fine, but more kind of knowing that, okay, this is a time where I do get really worked up and I'm likely to kind of get overloaded. So how can you minimize any kind of extra pressure in those times? And if possible at all, I say sometimes, preparing yourself beforehand, if it's possible, before you cook dinner, like to just take yourself into the bedroom for a moment and put on like a really brief meditation on a meditation app. I really like the Insight Timer app. It's got loads of free meditations, and you can just put 2 minutes in the search bar and just do like literally a 2-minute kind of anchoring thing to get your body as kind of as relaxed as it could be, then going in to your particular trigger, knowing that you're kind of trying to go in with a more mindful state, I guess, or a higher sense of awareness, and also a releasing of pressure, just releasing just a teeny tiny bit of pressure before the pressure actually releases for you with the anger. And a really basic breathing exercise called the physiological sigh is one that I really like. And it's supposed to be the fastest way to reduce the physiological sensations of anxiety. It's faster than meditation or any other breathing strategy, apparently. Like, that's some research from Stanford University. If you Google it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're so busy, right? We need something quick that fits in amongst all these busy things.
I know, that's it. And basically you breathe in through your nose, and pause, and then take another sip of air at the top, and then all the way out.
I bet everyone's doing that in time with me.
Yeah, that's it.
I feel the pressure coming out.
Yeah, it's really cool. Hey, but basically that little extra sip of air helps us to fully oxygenate our lungs. And when we're stressed, we don't oxygenate all of our lungs. Like, it's a short, shallow breath. And also, if we're not breathing in properly, we're not breathing out properly. And the breath out is actually the thing that turns down our fight or flight response the most. So breathing all the way out is really, really important. And if you get more breath in, you've got more breath to breathe all the way out. And that really dials down the heart rate, the blood pressure, overall kind of stress in the body. So it's a really good one.
And does that give your brain something else to think about as well in that moment? Like, there's obviously the physiological part of it. Is there a part of it that just like puts you more in control in that moment because you are choosing to do something?
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Yeah, it's just putting you into a state where you really mindfully have to think about it. You kind of, you have to think about it to breathe in a different way like that. So you're developing a mind-body connection more instead of just rush. I've got to do this and I can't handle this and what am I going to do here? And then you lose contact with what is actually physically happening in your body. So your mind and your body kind of gets disconnected. So a breathing strategy like that, 100%, you're just combining the two things together to stay grounded just for a minute, and the physiological benefit. of it as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's a tricky one. I find myself in this situation quite a lot where, yes, I'm busy. Is there anything that I want to or can give up to make more space? And it's something I'm constantly kind of reflecting on. I think a lot of the time when you have young children at home, even when you try and minimize, external things that you're doing or other pressures, there is just so much in day-to-day parenting of young children that sometimes it's not, I don't know, is this an excuse maybe from me, but do you think it is actually hard to not be busy as a parent?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I just don't know how you even achieve that in our
Yeah.
current society. Yeah, we have just got too much to do and too much stuff in our houses, even, too much
Yes.
stuff to clean.
Yes.
And
Too many
yeah,
rooms,
too many rooms.
even though
That's it.
even though we don't have enough space.
Yeah, that's right. And generationally, like, we live in bigger houses, like we have more stuff. There's a lot of sensory overload for children as well as adults,
Mm,
that all of these different things, like there's so much kind of sensory feedback that's happening. Um, and yeah, I mean, ideally, yes, we would live a much more minimalist lifestyle and we would cut everything right back. But, is that actually feasible in our current
yeah.
society? You'd have to make some pretty drastic changes.
At a time
Not
when you've
saying,
got not a lot of capacity, right?
yeah, that's right, exactly. And also just, the cost of living is a huge
Yes.
factor at the moment as well. Like I'm certainly seeing that as a significant extra pressure on families. It's probably the worst that it's ever been in our
Yeah.
psychology practice now, I would say, because and all of that cost of living means that people have to go back to work earlier.
Mm,
People have to work more, which means that we're busier again and we've got less capacity, more stressed, more disconnected from our bodies, more disconnected from our children. And the children can feel that as well. And then children are more likely to be reactive and vice versa. And there's just these feedback loops. So it's pretty hard. And I don't really know what the solution is other than making everything a lot cheaper and making it a lot easier for us to exist. But that's obviously not achievable. So we need to learn lots of compassion for ourselves.
yeah.
Like, yeah, really kind of, just realizing that it's not just all on you individually. Like there is so much pressure and we're all feeling it. I guarantee you, if you ask any parent, every parent is struggling with something. If it's not anger,
Yes.
it'll be something else.
What's the most common other thing?
Anxiety would be
Yeah.
the
Okay.
biggest other thing that I see. Yeah,
And how does that
worry and
present?
anxiety and not feeling good enough and
Yeah. Okay.
feeling quite critical, but maybe not getting into the point of being angry, just more being anxious and worked up and maybe struggling with sleep and relationship issues.
Yeah.
It's the other factor.
Gosh, there's a lot of pressures. And then when you're listing all those things and we're back to work or we're doing more, or we're trying to, keep everybody afloat and it's hard, then cue the guilt, right? Those feelings of like, I'm not doing enough. I should be doing more, slowing down more, trying to make more time for these things.
Yeah.
How does that present in the people that you're working with now?
Yeah, I guess that just adds to the extra pressure as well. And those shoulds, a should sort of thinking, which is often just a kind of style of thinking that makes us feel really guilty. And again, adds to that not feeling good enough, which needs to come back to a sense of realizing that we can't do it all, which
Mm,
is that self-compassion, I suppose, and a radical acceptance that there is no way that you can kind of keep on top of it, like in a compassionate sense, like not necessarily a pessimistic sense, but kind of this sense that it is so much bigger than us. And I'm really going to focus on the things that I can do. Like, what is it that I can control in this space? What are the immediate things I need to focus on? And I guess, prioritizing that a little bit, focusing on, well, really, what is the most important thing here? And I'm going to try and do the best that I can, but I don't have to do it all, sort of thing, as best as possible. It takes a lot of undoing, is the thing.
mm,
It's a tricky sort of long-term thing where we have to change our mindsets, and it doesn't mean that, it's not just like you can start doing that tomorrow, but it is this gradual chipping away at it. over the course of time to start to look at it in this sort of way.
Because when you say unlearning, like I think about the people we were describing before, or that kind of high achieving, doing the work, living their life, doing a lot of intentional things and achieving a lot of things intentionally. That sense of worth that comes from that is a big part of life for a lot of us, right? That you're a worthy or good person if you are hardworking and going above and beyond and looking after people and doing all of those things. But you just drive yourself into the ground if you put that kind of pressure on yourself around your worth, don't you?
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. With a perfectionist style of personality, that's the issue, is that there is so much connection to your self-worth being attached to achievement. And in the workplace, that can be fine. You can get away with that really pre-kids, because you can put your all into it. For example, using work as an example, it could be so many other things as
Yep.
well. But then again, if that's your style, like where the only way that really you feel good enough is basically by overachieving or setting quite high standards for yourself, then it's a really kind of loose thread to be attaching self-worth to. And then that's it, you put parenting into the mix. And we hear like what we should be doing. Like, we see on social media, like, don't say this, say this instead.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love it when those posts come up, but also it's just like, it can be so hard to actually achieve that sort of thing. And we know that we're not supposed to be angry with our kids. We know it's better to be gentle and connected to them. Like, I feel like most people are kind of, realizing that in this sort of space as well. Like, most women that get angry or anxious are so keen to be gentle and connected parents, and changing generational cycles as well is the other thing that I haven't even gone into.
I know, and there's a lot of them, isn't there?
I know.
We're trying to break.
That's what I mean. I could talk about this all day. That a lot of people are wanting to shift cycles from the way that they were parented and the way that they then parent their children. So there's a lot of that. I've just gone on a tangent, and I actually can't remember what my point was, but I hope it
I could
makes sense.
follow you down that tangent road. It's so validating to just recognize how many cycles we're trying to break in our kind of era of parenting. And I do, we don't have to fully break them, right? We can just start
No.
change, and we can decide consciously to do things differently, and that we want to not, you know, deal with our kids in an angry way all the time, and that we do want to have some of these things, and it's okay to be good enough at that and not nail it, not be a perfectionist about it either.
Absolutely. That's right. There's a really helpful statistic from the Gottmans. I don't know if you've heard of the Gottmans before, but they're relationship therapists, and they do a lot of work in the family space as well. But they talk about that you actually only need to be attuned to your children, which basically means getting it right, understanding their needs and being able to meet their needs only about 30% of the time for a secure attachment to develop. So it's actually a huge buffer. There's a huge window there, like where you don't need to get it right as often as what you think.
I actually think about this statistic a lot when I'm like trying to operate at some 90% level of like, oh, I've missed this, point. And it's like, no, 30%. Like you've got 30%. You can give yourself a pat on the back and keep
Yeah.
rolling.
That's right. Yeah, it's such a helpful statistic, isn't it? And it doesn't mean that you just, drop the bundle,
Yeah.
hey, don't even try. But it is really just reducing that perfectionist standard of thinking I need to be nailing it 100% of the time, because it's just completely untrue. And it's also not even a reasonable standard that you'd want to kind of set for your children anyway.
Yes.
Because your kids actually need to see the different range of emotions. And the thing is, like when you're getting angry, even though it's not great, it's still like a really good opportunity for kids to see that, one, you've acknowledged it, and that
Yes.
you're repairing it, saying, I'm really sorry I lost my temper. Can I try that again? And then literally sometimes I actually just redo the whole scenario and come in like Mary Poppins or something like that.
Hello. I
Or
love that idea.
yeah, it's quite fun. That does work sometimes.
I actually have been trying this week. I watched something last weekend and I was thinking about it, and I've been trying to do it, is actually expressing anger in a safe way that's like not directed to my kids. So like, I'm feeling
Yep,
angry and here's what I'm going to do, because I've been trying to give them
absolutely.
options to do when they're angry. But like, when you're angry, you don't want someone telling you how to calm down. What you want is to know what to do, when that kind of comes up. But
That's
again,
exactly right. That's it, and that's the
there's,
thing, isn't it? Like it doesn't mean that you're not getting angry at all. It is more
yes,
about how you end up modeling it. Like, I'm so angry and I'm going to have to walk out for a moment and I'm going to go and stamp my feet or
yeah.
take a big deep breath or walk outside for a minute. I'll be right back.
Somebody told me that anger kind of, you can help move anger with movement. So like
Mm.
moving your body, shaking your body, that kind of, is there anything to that, do you think?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I think look, in terms of empirical evidence for
Yeah.
shaking the body, I don't know whether there is any yet, a study that I could quote, but there's certainly mounting evidence for using your body in a somatic releasing way. Absolutely. Star jumps, yeah, shaking, like shaking your legs, and pushing against the wall as well is a really good
Oh,
one.
okay.
So you can literally just think about the anger and just be just standing in front of the wall and just pushing your hands onto it. A firm wall, a brick wall, or a
Yeah.
wall with a stud behind it.
We don't push over a wall in the house. That's how angry you were.
Yeah, like pushes you as hard as you can, and you'll feel like an adrenaline kind of surge that comes up, and crying. I've done that, and I've actually
Yeah.
kind of cried, which is good. Like, crying is a big kind of release as well. Crying is another kind of really important physiological release, which is really healing and resetting for the nervous system. So absolutely, move your body.
I feel like framing the anger like you have as that kind of pressure build up and needing that release has actually given me, like, it's not rocket science, is it? But it's given me a different perspective on anger as an emotion. And I really like that idea of having something physical to do with your body, like pushing the wall to show your kids how to
Mm,
do it, but also knowing that like those things will come, like they will happen. You will feel angry at times, and that is okay. We do not have to be this Zen parent. We will never be a Zen parent,
no, no,
and
that's
that's
right.
okay.
And that's the core of mindfulness as well. Like, we hear of mindfulness as being something that we need to cultivate, or a relaxing strategy that we should be doing more of. But the core of mindfulness is actually being able to be with uncomfortable emotions without, it's not that you actually need to be more relaxed or that you need to be breathing slowly and deeply. It's actually being able to kind of, notice this surge of adrenaline and heat coming from the middle of your body, like an up through your chest and into your face, and being able to kind of be with that a little bit more, and learning to that you don't necessarily react to the emotion so much. I guess that's what mindfulness is that we're staying with something without yelling the thing out, that we can kind of
Yes.
have the thought without reacting to the thought. And that's why it's so important, again, this kind of an acceptance state. It's okay to be angry, and we can tell our children this. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit your sister.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect way is, yep, I'm angry, understandable. I'm so tired. I'm hungry. I'm touched out. I've got so much to do. And I'm going to go and push this wall and shake and scream into my pillow.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like that just feels releasing even in itself, which I wonder. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about guilt, and I don't think we need to. There's enough content here for us to think about.
Yeah.
But to get rid of some of that guilt, then it comes up as well. Like, I am having a, valid reaction to a scenario, but I am also doing the things in my power to be aware of it, to stay in control, and to model to my kids this kind of emotional intelligence for the future. And like, I'm not going to get it right every time, but the
Mm.
fact that I'm even aware of it is so big, I think.
Absolutely. That's right. And that is the stuff that breaks generational cycles. And it's exactly as you said before, it's not like we're just going to break all the cycles
Yeah.
and do everything all at once. If you're the parent that can actually acknowledge that they're angry and apologize to their child and that they're going to try again next time and breathe or sigh or jump up and down or whatever it is, then that's a huge shift. Like that's a shift that some people never ever get to in their
Yeah.
lives. So, that's a huge gift that you can give to your children. Again, it doesn't mean that you're getting it right all the time, but you can definitely get to the point where you can manage it a lot better with learning these insights and basically kind of getting more okay with all of our more uncomfortable emotions. That anger isn't something that needs to be suppressed necessarily or got rid of. It's more about accepting that it's a part of our human existence, and that women are allowed to feel angry and mums are allowed to feel angry, and that we need to learn ways to have our anger in a more healthy way.
And I think part of that is a gift that you can give to yourself about seeing a psychologist, right? I honestly think it's been personally for me, like such a life-changing experience being able to talk to somebody, make sense of a lot of these feelings,
Yeah.
think about the things that I would like to do different, like quite conscious parenting, really, and in other parts of my life too. What do you think? I mean, this is totally off cuff, but what stops people from booking an appointment to see somebody like you, do you think?
Time, I
Yeah.
suppose, that people convince themselves that they don't have time to do it, that they're so, and then certainly, women can be so in the thick of it and they really haven't got anyone else to look after the children. That can certainly be a factor. Cost, even, people on maternity leave and,
Yeah.
might be, really pushed to be able to spend that money on themselves. And I guess, again, like, not prioritizing themselves and a self-worth feature is that, I shouldn't go and spend that money on myself, like it's too expensive. And, cue cost of living and all that sort of thing, because
Yeah.
literally, like, it is an expensive thing to be able to do these days. Unfortunately, don't let me go down that rabbit hole of mental health in Australia. So that, and I mean, sure, it's uncomfortable and painful, isn't it? Like, there's
Yeah.
certainly that as well. And maybe that they've never had to do it before, so there can be some guilt and shame and real just discomfort in it,
Yeah.
or just, and I think, people end up coming often because they've tried so many things on their own, and it's kind of ending up being pretty relentless, and they just need to in the finish, and they make it work. But I think there's definitely less stigma attached to it,
Yes.
certainly with our generation too.
I would say almost like in my circle of friends, almost the majority, or definitely the majority, but almost everybody is seeing some kind of mental health support and benefiting from it. Like, I just
Mm.
think it's part of this generational cycle breaking. What if you tell me a little bit about your kind of program? Because obviously, like, part of that is having access to somebody like you at a reduced cost compared to seeing somebody one on one. Tell me kind of about that.
Yeah, so my online program is really targeted to those women that I've just mentioned. Really, it's women that really feel like they don't have time to commit to individual therapy, and the cost as well. That overall, the cost is probably is certainly less than what you do in individual therapy. People do get private health rebates on it too. And also, the reason why I've got the online program is that I've got sort of all these foundations around anxiety and perfectionism and anger and relationships, which is information that people can keep coming back to. And also the collective sort of sense of being together. Because what I notice in the individual therapy space is that often there is that kind of real sense that they still feel quite isolated, and they still kind of feel a bit of a sense that that they're the only ones sometimes, and also just a forgetting of the material. So
Yes.
because you just be talking about, what's going on, and, you'll try this strategy and blah, blah, blah. And, that's helpful. But I've found, like in the in that group setting, just having access to the information all the time and in a finite period, and then the checking in this group space kind of has made the strategies achievable. So there's a lot more kind of feedback together as a group where everyone's doing the strategy and implementing, which can be a difficult thing with psychology sessions, because the psychologist suggests, or, let's try this. And then the client comes back and says, oh, no, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's right. I'll try that again next time.
And it sounds a little bit like the village, right? Like there is some of that support from other people being in the same place, trying to do the same things, cheering each other on. That is a part of
Yeah,
what a lot of us are missing.
that's right. Yeah. It's
I
trying to
love
tick
that.
that box, as best as possible. Obviously, it's not the same, but certainly, yeah, there's that element, like where everyone's kind of sharing, this happened to me and this is what I did, and other people are like, oh, yep, me too, or this is what I do, and that sort of sense. It definitely ticks that box and helps people to feel not so alone, and so it's a very validating space.
Where can people find it?
So on my website, which is sarahpurveypsych.com, and I'm running the group a couple of times a year. I've run it twice so far, and I've just actually come to the end of it this week. And I think the next one will be running later on this year, probably in September. But people can join a wait list for that. It's a 6-week group, a live kind of group.
Love it. I will link to that in the show notes, as well as where you can find Sarah. If you are lucky enough to be able to come and see her in person in Tasmania, or you do telehealth as well?
I do telehealth. Yes. No, I do. I do see, some interstate people. I'm quite busy currently. As I said, it's probably the busiest I've ever been, I
Yeah.
reckon. But people can get in probably by the end of the year, I would say. And
you have a wonderful team around you as well.
yes, that's right. Yes. Yep. Other people that kind of work in the parenting space as well. And the online program is probably kind of the best way to work at the moment. And maybe telehealth at some point.
I feel invigorated even just talking to you, like, yes, this is some of the things that I can do in my life. And yeah, I hope that people listening can take something away, even just a sense of you are normal, you are like everybody else, and there are some things in your power that you can do. So thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate your insightful comments and just the practical next steps we can all take.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I really enjoyed the chat.
My absolute pleasure. I will link to all of Sarah's information and the content that she shared in the show notes. A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.